Mitchell Porter once believed that saving a life was a singular event, a golden hour where time stood still and a single injection could balance the scales of fate. She had been a ghost in the machine, a delivery girl who knew every cracked pavement stone and neon-blurred shortcut in the city. But a year after she pulled the Mafia Queen from the edge of death with a generic EpiPen, Mitchell has learned that in the world of Baek Seung-min, debts are never truly settled. They simply evolve. She is no longer the girl skipping meals to afford her own medical safety net. Today, Mitchell is a top-tier nursing student living in a building she owns, riding a high-performance electric bike that serves as a constant matte black reminder of the man who stalked her life before he saved it. She has tried to remain a variable outside his world, a woman who isn't for sale and won't be put on a payroll. However, the city is changing. A new digital shadow is falling over the Iron Pine Syndicate, an enemy that doesn't use hit squads in SUVs, but algorithms and silent sabotage. As the ruthless Baek Seung-min finds his traditional power slipping through his fingers, he realizes that his obsidian towers and suited soldiers are useless against a ghost. To survive, the most feared man in the city must return to the alleys where it all began. This time, he isn't looking for a courier to save his mother. He's looking for the only woman whose heart is as steady as her hands, and a connection that can no longer be measured in blood debts or paper money. The fluorescent lights of the city hospital's east wing didn't shatter like the rain in the alleys. They hummed with a sterile, relentless precision. Mitchell Porter adjusted her stethoscope, the weight of it around her neck feeling more natural than the straps of a delivery bag ever had. It had been a year since she was a ghost in the machine, chasing digital timers for rent money. Now she was a top-tier nursing student, her hands steady as she checked the vitals of a sleeping patient. "Your form is perfect, Porter," her supervisor whispered, nodding at the chart. "You have the kind of calm you can't teach. Most students jump when the monitors beep." Mitchell offered a tight smile. She didn't tell the nurse that after dodging hit squads and navigating a bike through a night market at 30 miles per hour, a heart monitor's rhythm felt like a lullaby. She had traded the gray veins of the city for the blue veins of her patients, but the shadow of the Iron Pine Syndicate still loomed in the periphery of her life. As she finished her shift and headed toward the employee lockers, she felt that familiar prickle on the back of her neck, the sensation of being watched that had never truly left her since the day she met Baek Seung-min. She opened her locker to find a small, cream-colored envelope tucked inside her sneaker. "The chairman's mother misses her favorite opponent. Saturday, 6 p.m. Don't make her wait." Mitchell sighed, though she couldn't suppress the small tug of affection. Mrs. Baek, the Mafia Queen, had become a constant in her life, a woman who treated Mitchell like a granddaughter while simultaneously being the only person who could make the city's most feared man look like a frustrated child. She walked out to the hospital parking lot where her matte black V-Power e-bike sat in the staff-only section. She was about to unlock it when a sleek silver sedan, one she didn't recognize from the usual Iron Pine fleet, slid into the space behind her. The window rolled down, but it wasn't a guard with scarred knuckles. It was Seung-min himself. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp charcoal turtleneck. He looked disheveled, his wire-rimmed glasses sitting slightly crooked on his nose. "Mitchell," his voice lower than usual, carrying a jagged edge of exhaustion. "You're early, Seung-min," Mitchell said, her hand staying on the handlebars of her bike. "And I told you I don't do private house calls unless it's an emergency." Seung-min stepped out of the car. As he moved into the light of the street lamp, Mitchell noticed the dark stains spreading across the shoulder of his white shirt. He wasn't there to escort her to dinner. He was bleeding. "This isn't a social call," he said, leaning slightly against the car door. The logistics of the city just got complicated. I didn't want to go to the syndicate doctor. I wanted someone who doesn't report to a board of directors. Mitchell's nursing instincts overrode her caution. She stepped toward him, her eyes scanning the wound. Is it a puncture or a graze? A warning, Seung-min replied, looking at her with those cold, calculating eyes that seemed, just for a second, to hold a flicker of genuine relief. Mitchell looked at the man who had bought her building and endowed her scholarship, the man she had spent a year trying to keep at a distance. The life that was supposed to be settled, but as she reached out to steady him, she realized the pulse beneath his skin was racing as fast as her own. "Get in the back of my bike," Mitchell commanded, echoing the words she had said to his mother a year ago. "We're going to my apartment, and this time you're the one who has to hold on tight." The matte black V-Power e-bike didn't protest under the weight of two passengers. As Mitchell leaned into a sharp turn, weaving through a labyrinth of stagnant city traffic, she could feel Seung-min's hands gripping her waist. It was a mirror of the night she had saved his mother, but this time the tension wasn't just adrenaline, it was a heavy, unspoken awareness between them. Behind them, the silver sedan, Seung-min's latest safe vehicle, sat abandoned and locked in the middle of the road. "It just died," Seung-min hissed into her ear, his breath warm against her neck. The brakes, the steering, the GPS, everything went dark. It wasn't a mechanical failure. Someone flipped a switch. Mitchell didn't answer until she had banked into a narrow service alley behind a row of high-end boutiques. She knew these gray veins better than any satellite. "The Nexus," she muttered, recalling the name he'd whispered in the parking lot. "If they can hack a top-tier security car, they're watching every digital heartbeat in this city." She pulled the bike into the hidden garage of her apartment building, the one Mrs. Baek had bought for her as a thank you for saving her life twice. Once the heavy steel door slammed shut, the silence of the garage felt like a vacuum. "Sit," Mitchell commanded, pointing to a plastic crate. She didn't wait for him to argue. She reached into her bag and pulled out her medical kit. She had replaced the generic EpiPen with brand-named supplies, a gift from the man now bleeding in front of her. As she cut away the fabric of his sleeve, she saw the graze. It was shallow but messy. "You're lucky," she said, her voice dropping into the professional, steady tone she used during her hospital clinicals. "Another inch and you'd be looking at a shattered clavicle." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Seung-min replied, his face pale but his eyes fixed on hers. "They didn't want me dead, they wanted me stranded. A chairman who can't move is a chairman who can't lead." Suddenly, the lights in the garage flickered and died, plunged into the same bloody hue of red emergency lighting Mitchell remembered from the penthouse trap. His phone, sitting on the crate, began to vibrate. It wasn't a call. The screen was filled with a cascading waterfall of green code. "They're here," Seung-min whispered. Mitchell didn't panic. She had spent her life living by the second, chasing delivery timers. She grabbed his hand, his grip was strong, just like his mother's, and pulled him toward the back of the garage, where the trash chute and service lift were located. "In my world, everyone wants something from you," Mitchell echoed his own words back to him. "But in my world, we know how to disappear. We are going off the grid, Seung-min. No cars, no phones, no obsidian desks." She handed him a worn, salt-stained hoodie she kept in her bike's cargo bin. "Put this on. The most feared man in the city is about to become just another delivery guy." The city above was a frantic mess of gridlocked traffic and sirens, but inside the gray veins, time moved differently. Mitchell led Seung-min through a subterranean delivery tunnel that smelled of damp concrete and industrial exhaust. She moved with a rhythmic, predatory grace, her eyes scanning for the specific red-painted pipes that marked the old service routes of Koreatown. "They've hijacked the city's traffic grid," Seung-min muttered, his voice echoing in the narrow passage. He had discarded his tailored suit jacket for Mitchell's salt-stained hoodie, his transformation into a ghost nearly complete. The Nexus is using my own logistics software against me. They aren't just hunting me, they're paralyzing the entire Iron Pine network. Then stop thinking like a chairman and start thinking like a courier, Mitchell countered, stepping over a steaming sewer grate. A courier doesn't care about the grid. A courier cares about the destination. They reached a heavy steel door marked Loading Dock 4B. Mitchell pulled a worn keycard from her pocket, a relic from her days working 3 jobs to survive. Inside was a small, cluttered depot filled with unclaimed packages and the low hum of a backup generator. Mitchell grabbed a thermal delivery bag and tossed it to Seung-min. "We need to get your mother to the safe house in the logistics district, but the SUVs are tagged. If we move her in a medical transport, the Nexus will see the signal. We're going to move her as cargo." Seung-min's eyes narrowed, his old authoritative mask slipping back into place. "You want me to put the Mafia Queen in a delivery cart? I put her in a laundry chute once to save her life, and she called me fast. Right now, being invisible is better than being important." She pulled out her phone, not the high-end model Seung-min had gifted her, but an old burner device with a cracked screen. She tapped into a private underground rider app. Within seconds, the screen flickered with a dozen blue dots, other delivery riders, the ghosts of the city who worked for tips and ignored the law. "I'm calling in a decoy swarm. 50 riders are about to descend on your main headquarters. The Nexus will be too busy tracking the noise to notice one matte black e-bike heading toward the docks." Seung-min watched her, a strange expression softening his calculating eyes. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a girl who owed him a debt. He was looking at a partner who understood the city better than he ever would. "A debt of blood is not paid in copper," he whispered, quoting the note he had once left on her bike. "Forget the debt, Seung-min," Mitchell said, checking the battery on her bike. "Just make sure you hold on. This delivery is the only one that matters." The safe house was a windowless basement apartment beneath a dry cleaning business in the logistics district. It was a space Mitchell had used during her leanest months, a place where the air always smelled of steam and starch. Now it was a high-stakes triage center. Mrs. Baek lay on the small cot, her breathing labored. She had survived the cargo transfer, but the stress of the digital siege had taken its toll on her heart. Mitchell moved with practiced efficiency, her nursing training taking over. She checked the older woman's pulse, her eyes focused on her watch. "She's in tachycardia," Mitchell whispered, more to herself than to the man standing in the corner. Seung-min was a shadow against the peeling wallpaper. The salt-stained hoodie looked wrong on him, but the way he watched Mitchell, with a mix of desperation and awe, was entirely human. Suddenly, his hand flew to his chest. His breathing hitched, becoming shallow and jagged. "Seung-min?" Mitchell turned, her eyes widening. He didn't answer. He slumped against the wall, his eyes glazed. This wasn't a bullet wound. It was a total system failure. The weight of his crumbling empire, the threat to his mother, and the realization that his power was an illusion had finally caused a panic attack so severe it mimicked a cardiac event. Mitchell didn't hesitate. She stepped into his space, her hands firm. "Look at me. Seung-min, look at me." He couldn't. His eyes were rolling back, his body beginning to tremble. "Nursing 101, she hissed. She balled her fist and applied a firm, grinding sternal rub, a painful stimulus used to rouse patients, directly to his chest bone. He gasped. His eyes snapped back into focus as the sharp pain broke the spiral of his panic. His hands flew up, catching hers, his fingers locking around her wrists. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was their synchronized heavy breathing. "I've got you," Mitchell said, her voice dropping into a low, soothing anchor. "The city can't see us here. The Nexus can't find us. You're just a man in a room, and I'm just the girl who knows how to keep you breathing." Seung-min didn't pull away. He leaned his forehead against hers, his grip on her wrists softening into something desperate and tender. "I spent my whole life building a fortress. I didn't realize I was just building a cage." Mitchell looked at the most feared man in the city and saw the brave, tired heart his mother had once described. In the dim light of the safe house, the debt was forgotten. There was only the pulse beneath her fingers and the slow, steady rhythm of a connection that no paper money could ever buy. The steam from the dry cleaner upstairs seeped through the ceiling, creating a ghostly mist in the basement. Mrs. Baek, the Halmoni, grandmother of the Iron Pine, was sitting up now, her back against a stack of folded linens. She looked far less like a Mafia Queen and more like a stubborn elder who was bored of being coddled. "Stop hovering, Seung-min," she snapped, though her eyes were kind. "You look like a nervous bird in that oversized hoodie. It doesn't suit your jawline." Seung-min, who had spent the last hour pacing the perimeter of the room like a caged wolf, stopped mid-stride. He looked at Mitchell, who was calmly organizing her medical supplies. "She's stable," Mitchell said, stifling a yawn. "Her heart rate has leveled out, but she needs real rest, not a basement floor." Mrs. Baek gestured to the small wooden table between them. "Sit, both of you. I found a deck of Huatu cards in the drawer. We are going to play." "Mother, this isn't the time," Seung-min started. "It is exactly the time," she interrupted, shuffling the floral cards with a dexterity that belied her age. "The Nexus thinks they are winning because they have the big data, but they don't understand the small heart. They are looking for a chairman and a nurse. They aren't looking for a family." As they played, the atmosphere shifted. The high-stakes tension of the digital siege was replaced by the rhythmic slap of cards on the table. Mrs. Baek watched them closely, noticing how Seung-min reached for a card and his hand brushed against Mitchell's, noticing how Mitchell didn't flinch, but instead met his gaze with a steady, quiet challenge. "You know, Mitchell," Mrs. Baek said, laying down a bright card, "my son has always been a man of iron, but iron is brittle. It breaks under enough pressure. You are like the electric wires in your bike. You bend, you move, you carry the spark through the darkest alleys. He needs that spark." Mitchell looked down at her cards, her cheeks warming. "I'm just a student, Mrs. Baek. I'm just trying to get through my clinicals." "A student who knows how to keep a heart beating when the world stops," Seung-min said quietly, his voice devoid of its usual coldness. He looked at Mitchell, and for the first time he wasn't seeing a variable or a debtor. He was seeing the only person who had ever walked into his life and demanded nothing but his survival. The wisdom of the Halmoni was clear. The Nexus could hack the city's brain, but they couldn't hack its soul. As the night deepened, the connection between the mafia boss and the delivery girl grew from a shared trauma into a shared understanding. They weren't just allies anymore. They were the only two people in the world who truly understood the weight of the other's heart. The safe house was a sanctuary, but the city was still screaming. Through a modified police scanner, Mitchell and Seung-min listened to the chaos. The Nexus hadn't just taken the Iron Pine's money, they had hijacked the supply chains. Food trucks were being rerouted to empty lots, and medical supplies were rotting in locked shipping containers. "They're suffocating the city to flush me out," Seung-min said, staring at a paper map of the harbor. His digital devices were dead, but his mind was sharper than ever. "I have the cargo, but I have no way to move it without their sensors picking up my trucks." Mitchell looked at the map, then at the man who was finally beginning to see the world through her eyes. "You're thinking too big, Seung-min. You're trying to move a mountain when you should be moving pebbles. She pulled out a marker and began drawing lines, not along the highways, but through the gray veins, the bike paths, the pedestrian bridges, and the service elevators of the underground malls. The Nexus tracks engines and GPS signatures, she explained, her hand brushing his as she pointed to a specific pier. But they don't track human feet. They don't track e-bikes. If we break the shipments down into 1,000 small deliveries, we can move the entire inventory right under their noses. As they worked through the night, the professional barrier between them finally dissolved. There was a moment, while they were huddled over a crate of medical supplies, when the silence became heavy with something other than strategy. "Why are you doing this, Mitchell?" Seung-min asked, quietly. "The debt was paid. You have the building, you have the scholarship. You could have walked away the moment I showed up at the hospital." Mitchell stopped, a roll of medical tape in her hand. She looked at him, really looked at him, beyond the suit and the title. "Because you're the first person who ever saw me as more than just a girl on a bike," she admitted. "And because I think, underneath all that iron, you're actually afraid of being alone." The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. Seung-min reached out, his hand hesitating before he gently tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was hesitant, as if he were afraid he might break the fragile peace they had built. In the dim light of the basement, surrounded by the logistics of a war, they found the logistics of a heart. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, it was the quiet realization that they were no longer two people paying off a debt, but two people who had become each other's destination. The humid air of the docks tasted of salt and impending rain. The Nexus had finally pinpointed Seung-min's location, but they hadn't accounted for Mitchell's army. "They're coming," Seung-min said, checking the feed on a hijacked monitor. A fleet of black, silent electric SUVs was converging on the warehouse district. "They've locked down the perimeter. No vehicle can get in or out." "Good thing we aren't using vehicles," Mitchell replied. She pulled out her burner phone and sent a single word to her encrypted network: "Bloom." Suddenly, the night was filled with the whine of small electric motors. From every side alley, shipping container, and basement ramp, hundreds of delivery riders emerged. They wore mismatched neon vests and carried thermal bags, their LED headlights creating a blinding, chaotic strobe effect. To the Nexus's high-tech sensors, it looked like a swarm of locusts, 1,000 digital noise signatures moving in every direction at once. "Go," Mitchell told Seung-min. "They can't track one person in this mess. Wear the vest, keep your head down, and get to the command center at Pier 19. I'll lead the main interceptors away." "Mitchell, no!" Seung-min grabbed her arm, his fingers tight. "I'm not letting you be the target again." "I'm not a target, Seung-min. I'm the delivery girl," she said with a sharp, fearless grin. "And I have a package that's overdue." She tore out of the warehouse on her V-Power bike, a red flare strapped to the back. 3 Nexus SUVs immediately broke rank to pursue her, thinking she was the chairman. She led them on a high-speed chase through a labyrinth of stacked shipping containers, a terrain she had memorized years ago. As she banked a turn so low her knee nearly scraped the asphalt, the lead SUV lost traction on a patch of industrial oil she'd strategically leaked earlier. The vehicle slammed into a pile of hollow crates, blocking the path for the others. Meanwhile, at Pier 19, Seung-min reached the Nexus's mobile command hub. Without their digital advantage, the tech syndicate's guards were no match for a man who had fought his way to the top of the Iron Pine. The confrontation ended not with a bang, but with a deletion. Seung-min didn't kill the Nexus leader. He uploaded a virus Mitchell had helped him deliver, a code that wiped their servers and returned the hijacked logistics to the city's public infrastructure. As the sun began to peak over the harbor, the digital siege lifted. The noise of the delivery riders faded back into the city streets. Mitchell pulled her bike up to the pier, her chest heaving, her face smudged with grease and salt. Seung-min was waiting. He didn't say a word. He simply walked over and pulled her into a fierce, bone-crushing hug. For the first time, he didn't care who was watching. He buried his face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of rain and ozone. "Delivery confirmed," she whispered in his ear. The morning after the Nexus fell, the city didn't wake up to the news of a gang war. It woke up to a miracle of logistics. Hospitals that had been low on supplies suddenly found their loading docks full. Food banks received shipments that had been lost in the system for weeks. In the high-rise office of the Iron Pine Syndicate, a place Mitchell had once entered as a terrified captive, the atmosphere had shifted from a fortress to a hive of activity. Seung-min stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, but he wasn't looking at the skyline. He was looking at the reflection of the woman sitting at his desk. Mitchell was dressed in her nursing scrubs, ready for a makeup clinical shift, but she was currently focused on a laptop screen. She was helping Seung-min's remaining loyalists transition their shadow delivery routes into a legitimate community-based logistics network. "The board is calling for a vote of no confidence," Seung-min said, his voice calm, almost relieved. "They say I've gone soft by giving away the leverage we held over the city's infrastructure." Mitchell didn't look up from the screen. "You didn't give away leverage, you gave away a target. The Nexus was able to attack you because you were a monopoly. Now the power is decentralized. You can't kill a ghost, and you can't hack 1,000 independent writers." Seung-min walked over and placed a heavy linen envelope on the desk. Mitchell froze. "If this is another building, Seung-min, I'm going to have to start paying property taxes I can't afford." "It's not a building," he said. Mitchell opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document, but it wasn't a deed for land. It was a charter for a new foundation, the Porter Bach Medical Logistics Initiative. It was an endowment that would fund mobile clinics and emergency delivery services for the city's poorest districts, using the very routes Mitchell had mapped out. "I'm stepping down as chairman of the Iron Pine," Seung-min said, and the weight of those words seemed to physically lift from his shoulders. "I'm taking the legitimate side of the business, the shipping, the warehouses, and turning it into this. But I can't run a medical initiative. I don't know the first thing about sternal rubs or golden hours." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "I want you to be the director. Not now, finish your degree, but the position is yours. It's a new kind of deed, Mitchell, a deed of partnership." Mitchell looked from the paper to the man. The cold, wire-rimmed glasses were gone, replaced by a gaze that was warm and terrifyingly sincere. "You're asking me to work with the former head of the Mafia," she teased, though her voice wavered. "I'm asking the woman who saved my life to help me save the city," he replied. Mitchell reached out not to take the pen, but to take his hand. The calluses on his palms met the steady strength of hers. The debt was no longer a burden. It was a bridge. The sun was beginning to dip below the skyline, painting the glass towers of the city in shades of liquid gold and bruised violet. It was the golden hour, that fleeting moment Mitchell used to spend racing against delivery timers. Today, however, she wasn't racing. Standing on the steps of the university's grand hall, Mitchell looked down at her graduation gown. The heavy fabric felt like armor of a different sort. Around her neck wasn't a delivery bag strap, but the green and white stole of the Nursing Honors Society. "You're staring at the horizon again," a familiar voice said. Seung-min was leaned against the stone railing. He had traded his obsidian black suits for a simple navy blazer, his hair slightly wind-blown. He looked less like a predatory boss and more like a man who had finally learned how to sleep through the night. Beside him, Mrs. Baek sat on a bench, looking regal in a silk hanbok, holding a bouquet of flowers that looked suspiciously like they cost more than Mitchell's first bike. "I'm just realizing that for the first time in 5 years, no one is tracking my GPS," Mitchell said, walking over to them. Mrs. Baek stood up, pulling Mitchell into a fragrant hug. "You are a doctor's nightmare and a patient's dream, Mitchell Porter. Now, go take your photos. My son has been practicing his happy face in the mirror for 3 days. It's still a bit stiff, but he's trying." As Mrs. Baek wandered off to find a better backdrop for a selfie, Seung-min stepped closer. The space between them, once filled with life debts and power plays, was now occupied by a quiet, comfortable heat. "I have something for you," Seung-min said. He reached into his pocket. Mitchell braced herself for a diamond or a key, but instead he pulled out a small, worn plastic casing. It was her original EpiPen, the one she had used to save his mother in that rain-slicked alley a year and a half ago. It was empty, a relic of a desperate night. "I kept it," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register. "It reminded me that the most powerful thing in this city wasn't my empire. It was the heart of a girl who had every reason to walk away, but stayed." He looked at the empty medical device, then back at her. "I spent my life thinking everything had a price. Then I met you, and I realized some things only have a value. You saved my mother, then you saved my city. But Mitchell, you saved me from becoming the monster everyone thought I was." Mitchell reached out, her fingers brushing his as she took the plastic casing. "We saved each other, Seung-min. That's what a partnership is." "Then let's make it official," he said. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't need to. The vow was in his eyes. No more debts, no more logistics of war, just us. Wherever you go, I'm the one riding pillion. Mitchell laughed, a bright, clear sound that echoed across the campus. She leaned in, her graduation cap tilting as she pressed her forehead against his. In the glow of the golden hour, the delivery girl and the reformed boss weren't characters in a syndicate drama anymore. They were two people who had found a home in the one place they never thought to look: each other. As the ceremony bells began to ring, Mitchell took his hand. She wasn't just a ghost in the machine anymore. She was the pulse of the city. And for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. If you've stayed with us until the final golden hour, you know this was never a simple tale of debt and duty. This is what happens when the clinical precision of a healer meets the cold-blooded strategy of a king. It's a reminder that sometimes salvation doesn't wear a white coat. It wears wire-rimmed glasses and a shadow of violence. If Mitchell and Seung-min's journey from a rain-slicked alley to a shared empire left you breathless, hit that like button. Subscribe to Silent Speak Stories, because you've clearly developed a taste for the kind of love that's forged in the fire of a syndicate war. Drop a comment below and tell me, whose life should we save or ruin next? In this city, every predator eventually finds the one person who isn't afraid of their teeth, and every ghost deserves a place to call home. You've been listening to Silent Speaks Stories, where the deepest connections are whispered in the dark, and every happy ending is written in blood.